Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode 43 of the Adam Makes Beer Industry Pro podcast. Today, I'm excited to be chatting with Boyd Culver of Coldbreak. Before we get rolling, let me give a shout out to our fantastic sponsors that make content like this possible. Starting a brewery is a big step. Blickman Engineering is here to help. Since 2006, they've equipped hundreds of nano breweries for success. Their new 3.5 barrel Pro Surface electric brewing system cuts maintenance and saves at least 30 minutes per brew day with powerful under kettle heating. From 1 to 15 barrel brew houses to keg washers and grain mills, Blickman has what you need. Ready to go pro? Contact Phil or Tom at proseries@blickmanengineering.com. Blickman Engineering is a proud sponsor of this channel and loves to help breweries at every stage of their journey. Tracking and managing the financial health of your brewery is a primary pillar of success. Check out my boy David Lentz at Brewed Fiscally. This man has the industry experience and skills you need so you can focus on growing your business. Bookkeeping, fractional CFO support, financial management system design, business plan review, hit up your boy. Check him out at brewedfiscally.com or shoot him an email at david@brewedfiscally.com. He's good people. I wrote the second one, Boyd.
Wow, it was all just...
the first one. The first one I did. Hey, everybody. Boyd, welcome. This is Boyd Culver. Is the founder and president of Coldbreak in Grand Rapids. Coldbreak started as a home brewing equipment manufacturer in his basement and has since become a leader in portable draft systems with over 5,000 breweries using their boxes worldwide. Boyd, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. It's great to see you.
Yeah, man. Good to see you too. It's a throwback. I don't believe I've talked to. No, I've had Rock Van Meter on, but I haven't had a whole lot of Michigan connections on here since I started doing this stuff. So for those of you that don't know, the first 10-ish years of my brewing career happened up in Michigan, and so yeah, we have a little bit of a Michigan connection here. So yeah, how's your winter been going, man?
I just got back from Austin yesterday, so a little reminder today that it hasn't been great weather-wise. I mean, nobody from Michigan really likes the weather. It's not perfect.
My wife and I went there. We didn't have a honeymoon, and we had never really traveled anywhere by ourselves for like the first 21 years of our marriage. And then we spent 8 days in Austin. It was beautiful. It was the middle of May. It was actually when we first dropped. She and I, we popped a bottle of champagne at 9 in the morning as my first YouTube videos went live. So we are actually on vacation when we are releasing our first videos. First of all, we thought we were going to be beating the heat by being down there in, the middle of May. Not a chance, dude. It was 95. Okay. It was no joke. So yeah, how was it while you were down there?
It was between 75 and 85 and sunny all 3 days.
Yeah. I saw the pills backdrop.
Yeah.
From that's oh goodness, is that Austin Beer Garden?
Yeah, ABGB.
Yeah.
I love that spot.
Wasn't that amazing, man?
I wish I could have gotten a pizza and a picture with a couple friends and sat in the corner for a band, but I didn't have any friends with me, so it was just me. No, I'm just kidding. I just had a couple of the clean Pilsner and a nice lager. Yeah. I was really impressed. I was impressed with every brewery I went to in Austin.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the beer down there, man. And I think it is interesting when you kind of see, like, one of the things that I always enjoyed. I don't know if it's because, like, my background of, like, teaching social studies and stuff, like, at the beginning of my career, but I always geek out on how the locality drives the style, whether you want to talk about water profiles or ingredients or weather, right? And yeah, you got a lot of really clean crushable beer going on down there.
Yeah, absolutely. And it makes sense.
Yeah, it was that was a fun trip. That was a fun trip. So well let's dip in a little bit. So, you know, I've been talking you up for the last few years here on the channel. I'm a proud owner of one of your Jockey boxes. I've done some content on that. You guys can dig in on that, jump back in the channel a little bit and search that stuff out. But you know, I was saying off air, I remember the first time seeing one of your Jockey boxes. Up until then, I had seen some of the plastic ones that you can get online, which can get the job done. But they have some intrinsic faults to them. And Nate brought in that Coldbreak Jockey box and opened it up, man, and it blew my mind. It was awesome. It has those backing plates, so you're not screwing things through the wall of the cooler. It's very, very good stuff. So how did you end up being somebody that made Jockey boxes?
How much time you got? Back in 2004, it all started with like a lot of brewers, not that I'm a brewer, but it all started with a kit of a Brewer's Best Amber Ale. I think that's the story for a lot of people. It was actually my brother-in-law who brewed it. And it was, you know, at the time we were drinking really fancy beer like Newcastle. Yeah. That was
man. Yeah.
And we were really, you know, we're young in our early 20s. So it was like you get one bomber of Newcastle and then a 6-pack of swag beer. You drink the Newcastle first, you know, get fancy. But so he brewed the Amber Ale and it was okay, you know, and that it was intriguing to me. So I got the porter, brewed it. And I, you know, at that time I was also like really drinking Eddie Fitz. Like that's kind of what I cut my teeth on in the mid 2000s. And so that's what I wanted to replicate. And it was not very good, but it was fine. Right. Sure. It was enough to make me want to do it again.
Yep.
And so brewed a couple more times, realized quickly that putting your kettle in a snowbank is not the way to do it. You got to kill it faster. So I looked into it and found out about an immersion chiller. And I worked in tool and die and had access to like copper tubing. Excuse me. So I bought 50 feet of copper tubing off my boss, made 2 chillers because I only needed 25 feet, sold the one, and I sold it that day on Craigslist. And then I had one that was basically paid for. So I thought, shit, I'm going to try that again. Bought 50 more feet, cut it in half, coiled it again, sold both of those in a day on Craigslist. And then I just kept replicating that, and to the point where I think I'd moved into eBay at that point, and we were selling like 50 a month, 50 to 75 a month, I would say.
Really?
Yeah, it grew really quickly because there weren't a lot of options back then. Mm-hmm. And so did that for a while, but it got to the point where just working in tool and die, you know, I was working 60 plus hours a week. I didn't really have time to get to the post office by 5 to ship these chillers. So I thought I should get into more of like a wholesale concept. And so I went to, you're familiar with Siciliano's, I assume?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Who's not, right? So I went and had a conversation with Steve, which I'm still sweating about because that was a little stressful. Love the guy. He's so great. Not the most approachable. So I said, Steve, you know, I've got these things, and I didn't know even what, you know, how to wholesale things, but did a little bit of research, started an LLC, said, hey, we'd like to sell these at your place if that's possible. And he said, sure, in so many words, but took them on consignment. And that worked. He sold them all in like a week. So he called me and said, hey, let's restock. And that just, you know, got a little more consistent. And so I don't know, I went down to Kalamazoo for something and stopped into the Bell's homebrew store, the general store there, talked to David, said, hey, you know, we're selling these chillers at Siciliano's. Would you guys be interested in taking them? Yeah. Put them on the shelves. Just kept growing and growing. And, you know, making a chiller by wrapping it around a corny keg is not really the most efficient thing in the world. So I ended up building a jig and I would make them in a lathe for a little bit, but then I built a machine, and we're actually still using that machine today, which is actually saying a lot because we, once we got Bell's, we used that to get into Rebel Brewer, which was a homebrew store down in Tennessee, which has since closed, unfortunately. But we just kept getting bigger, like I said, and then finally, one of the biggest homebrew stores in the country, the online supplier, connected with us, and we were able to secure that company.
Yep.
And that it timed well with being a new dad. My oldest daughter was 9 months old, let's say, around that age. And it was like, I'm leaving for work at 5:30 in the morning. She's asleep, getting home from work at 5:30, and she's only awake for an hour and a half. And I got pretty depressing. And I'm like, that's not what I want in life.
Sure.
And so thankfully, my loving wife is a teacher and has incredible health insurance. So it made it. I was making just enough with Coldbreak to be able to take the risk and cut loose. Well, it was a slow process. And the place I worked was pretty great. And I got a shop nearby there. And like if a truck came, I would get a phone call from Jim at Dayton, say, "Hey buddy, I'm on my way." So I'd tell my boss, "Hey, can I jump out for a minute?" No problem. And so it just, went from getting cut down to 5 days a week to 4 to 3 to 2 to 1. And finally it was just, we're doing this thing. And
definitely. So
and that was in 2011. So
okay. So that kind of, and then you end up making the jump from kind of doing like the homebrew style immersion chiller ultimately into the Jockey box.
Not quite there yet.
Okay.
I said, how much time do you have? So backtrack a little bit. The funniest part about getting my own little warehouse was I had this little 1948 forklift that I bought for $400, and it was hiding in my little tiny garage, and I would build the pallets, load them on my pickup, and drive them to Estes, or however you pronounce it, and ship them that way. Well, one day the truck shows up, not supposed to be coming to my house, and I quick unload because we lived on a busy road. I quick unload the truck, and I'm backing up, and wham, hit the garage door with my forklift. And my wife was like, maybe we get the forklift out of here. So that's how I ended up in the warehouse. So, and that in about 2012, we were putting out a lot of chillers, but I was still working a lot of hours, and it was legit just me. And then Chris, my business partner, who I've been friends with since middle school, came along and was like, "Hey, do you need help?" Because I have an inability to ask for help. That hasn't worn off. And
sure.
So I said, "Yeah, let's see what we can do." And so he came in, and he kind of, I had Coldbreak was the name, but it was really, we were doing a lot of more, non-labeled, products. You know what I mean? We didn't actually necessarily have our branding on it.
Sure.
So Chris kind of was like, "Hey, we need to, let's really push the brand, so people know where they're getting these chillers from."
Sure.
It was really brilliant. We should have done that a lot sooner. And, so then he came in part-time for a while, and then eventually became full-time. And he's been great. He's like the yin to my yang. I often use a box scenario when I describe how we are. It's like if I needed to put a thing in a box, I would spend hours trying to figure out the perfect box to put the thing in. And Chris would just put the thing in a box. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
And when we work together, we land in that middle zone, and it's been great. So
nice.
So to get to the Jockey boxes, Matt Michaels from Gravel Bottom came to us. He had a homebrew store. Yeah, great man. And he had a homebrew store. He sold our chillers, so he knew that we coiled metal. So he said, "Hey, can you guys build me a Jockey box?" I should do my Matt impression. It's really good.
Go for it.
And it's like Arnold. Everybody's got it. But anyway, I said, I've seen them. We'll buy one. We'll look at it and see what we can do. bought one of the other Jockey boxes that you were referring to earlier and immediately thought, well, we can make it better than this.
Yeah.
And so we made our first Jockey box, which was an absolute behemoth 8-tap, 120 quart or something like that. Weighed like 100 pounds before you put an ice cube in it.
It was like one of those big old like fishing coolers, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was massive.
I remember that because I remember. So I saw that one. I didn't even know it was you guys, but I saw that thing at a festival and it blew my mind.
There's still quite a few of them out there. So once people saw, I think Vivant was the second customer that we had. They saw it and they were like, "Oh, we need one of those."
Yeah.
And then by the time Winter Beer Fest came around, there was half a dozen of them, which was pretty cool. Yep. I actually saw one. Bells was using one at Great Taste last year, and I was like, "Man, nice. That's pretty sweet to have." It's insane, but we no longer build it. I mean, we will build 8-taps if people ask for them, but it's not something that we do as a standard, just because we go out in the field and use them a lot. Like we try and pour for breweries whenever we can, just to improve our products and, see how they function. And immediately we were like, no, this isn't it. So we just recommend 4 taps.
It's so big.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was pretty fun. And then, we saw that success and we were like, well, how can we build on this? And then Matt suggested that we join the Michigan Brewers Guild, which we did. Which is what I'm drinking out of right now. Michigan Brewers.
There you go.
Support your local brewery. And so we joined that, and it happened. It was the first year. It was the year that Winter Conference was up at Boyne, and so that was a great place to hang out and meet people. And we fit right in. Just our kind of people, we just like to have a good time, and we're down to earth, and and like. Our products reflect how brewers act and how they feel and how they want things to go. Like we offer these front input Jockey boxes, which we once called bartender boxes, but other companies started using that name, so we abandoned ship. But
sure,
that was we were at GABF one year, and brewer walks up and he said, "Man, these are the nicest boxes I've ever seen. I just wish somebody would put the inputs on the front side so you can see when your beer's about to blow."
Yeah.
Well, he wouldn't have said that if it wasn't true. And that was actually what started that. That was in 2013, I think. And so that's how we operate, like we're always trying to improve. That's just the kind of guys that we are. And better to take advice from than the people that are using your products.
Definitely. Well, and I like the fact that you're saying, you like to actually get out in the field and use them. You know what I mean? Because that's, that's where it's actually happening. You know what I mean? That's where it's actually happening. So kind of big picture, what don't people, if you tell people, you're in the beverage industry, right? And in part you're servicing the craft beer industry. What don't people realize about the job that you do? Or what misconception do people have about the job that you do?
That's a good question. I guess, personally, and I see this a lot with, the business owners that I know in the industry, and maybe it's industry specific, and sorry if I'm not answering your question properly.
No, you're good. Go.
It seems as though the Blickman's a great example. Like I know those guys, and no matter how big they got, they're always very involved, in the company. And like I said, I see that across the whole industry. I mean, there's your rare occasions where people bounce and whatever, but we just always stay involved. We'll answer the phone, we'll go out in the warehouse. I run the majority of our social media. So we just operate like a small business, no matter how big we get.
Dude, you just mentioned it. I've been really, really impressed. It's social media is an interesting world. One, it was a world that I was not part of until it was a world I removed myself from until I started doing the YouTube content. And so I had started recording in January of 2022, but I was really, if you think I'm bad at it now, ladies and gentlemen, I was so bad at it that I couldn't release the stuff that I was doing. And I was actually recording for months before I was able to start putting stuff out. And so I started an Instagram page to start kind of farming eyes for the eventual YouTube channel. And it was, it's wild, man. You know, first of all, it's hard to grow. And just when you kind of think you understand what you're doing, you know, you go back a few months later and you're like, oh, well, this was wrong for this, and this reason. Your following on Instagram is massive. You're at like 116,000 followers on Instagram, which is crazy. And I think it's a big deal. I really do think it's a big deal on the business side. And so you said that you had started some of the work. Do you still do the content creation?
It's a team effort for sure.
Yep.
But I do a lot of it.
Yeah. Yeah, you guys crush with it, man. You do a great job of showing your product in the field. The pace is right. And you do an excellent job of showing people what the range of the product is too. I think that's really interesting. Who is how many people do you have on that side of the program?
Not very many.
Yeah.
There's just a few of us really that do that.
When did you really start dialing that up?
Yeah.
Was that right from the beginning? Or did it take was there a specific time where you really started to pour more into it? Or
you know, it's very organic, and it wasn't as much a matter of the effort we put in as it was the content. Because, like, you know, we had Jason Lay working for us pre-COVID, and he did an awesome job. But the fact of the matter is, like, our jockey boxes don't mean anything to people that don't know what they are. You know what I mean? And that was what we were at the time. Sure, like we had 1,200 followers for the longest time, and it was all breweries and brewery industry people that knew what jockey boxes were. But like I said, I mean, it's like if somebody were if somebody were like showing you a backhoe and you didn't have any need for a backhoe, like, why would you follow that? You know what I mean?
Sure.
And so, like I said, it wasn't a matter of effort. It was just a matter of creating a new product that didn't exist out there, which is the cold one, the little 2-gallon portable kegerator. That came out of COVID, out of necessity, because obviously when COVID happened, beer festivals didn't happen. So our sales just dropped to the bottom. And it was like, we got to do something. And selfishly, like, I had a sixtel of Cedar Springs Pilsner, which is one of my favorite beers. And it was the first keg I put into my kegerator in 5 years, you know, and it's just been sitting there plugged in. And it was, you know, during COVID, and everybody was having an extra beer a night or whatever that was. And even then it was just too much beer, too much of one kind of beer for me, even if it's one of my favorite beers. Yeah. And I thought, you know, there's got to be a sweet spot. And so we had already been selling G4 kegs, so I knew about the little threaded sixtel. So I picked one of those up and had Jeff Sheehan fill it for me, and at Rockford Brewing, of course, and brought it home and hooked that up to my kegerator, and it was a great amount of beer, so it was perfect. So then I built around that. One thing I wanted to do when I decided to make it a portable unit was make it self-contained, because a lot of the small format beer dispensers have to be in something, whether it's a cooler or a refrigerator. They can't just sit out and dispense. So that was really what I wanted to do. And so we already had this cooler that we were using for a jockey box, which we had developed, but it was as simple as I wanted to slap a tower on it and turn it into a kegerator. And so I had sourced some different miniature regulators and dialed that in. And the first one I built with these 16-gram like paintball gun cartridges, and it took like 2 or 3 of those cartridges to push one keg. And I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. So I found these 74-gram CO2 cartridges that will end up pushing like 3 kegs, and that was that was perfect. And on top of that, like you'll notice that our faucet doesn't have a flow control on it. And that's because it's a balanced system, right? So you set it to 10 to 12 PSI and it's going to pour a great pint of beer or cocktail, whatever you're going to drink. Obviously, beer is more important when it comes to the carbonation. But that was, you know, I had one of those small format things and I never used it because it was, there was always a trick to make it work right. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that was a lot to say that when we launched that on Instagram, it just went viral. And like, I think within a week, we had like 6 million views on that first video. We had the components to build like 28 cold ones. And we sold like a couple of hundred immediately.
So how big of like how large of a percentage is that product? Has that like really taken over for you, or is it a smaller portion of what you do?
I'd say I should know the numbers off the top of my head, but
I mean, even ballpark.
Yeah, 20% probably. So it's significant. Yeah. And it's just growing really fast, you know. Like, people,
I think you do a good job of making like the fun use case for it, right? And even when like even when you get into talking about I was about to say canned cocktails, but keg cocktails, you do some really descriptive stuff, or descriptive isn't exactly it, but you give people ideas of what you can do with the product, because everybody knows you can hook it up and pour a beer with it, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, showing like those, fun to go mixed drinks and whatever, it's a very cool sell.
Thanks. Yeah, it is. And that's where our Instagram grew, because it's fun, right? You can tell the whole story in 60 seconds. And so, you can't do that with a Jockey box. Like, I mean, I guess you can, but it's still difficult for people to wrap their heads around.
For sure.
And so, it's funny you say that, because it, like I said, it was developed for beer. And in fact, when COVID hit, Nate from Greyline texted me and he's like, "Hey man, because they shut down right away." And he was like, "I got some yeast that I'm not going to be able to use. Do you want it?" And I was like, "Sure." He's like, "Come by." All right. He gave me a 7-barrel pitch of 1056. Like, I don't have my calculator, but I think that's like 214 batches of beer. And a lot of bread and a lot of pizza dough. But so I ended up making I think I probably have 30 recipes for the cold one that we just still haven't launched yet for whatever reason.
Sure.
But it was intended to be for beer. And I can't remember what made me, I think I was doing a golf outing. That's what it was. Okay. And somebody was like, "Hey, can you make Jack and Cokes?" So I thought, sure. Did some math and figured that if I poured a half gallon of Jack Daniels in the keg and then topped it off with Coke, it would be 9% cocktails, which is pretty good ABV.
Yeah, it's a solid cocktail.
Yeah. So we made those, and then and that was right before we made the Captain and Coke, which that video that we launched with it wasn't satire, but it was kind of like, who's drinking Captain and Cokes, right? Like it wasn't like we were trying to do something fancy there. It was just to get, and that's a lot of why we got so much feedback on that and so much engagement, because people, like, nobody, and some people focused on what the thing was, but so many people were just focused on the fact that it was Captain and Cokes, and they're just arguing about whether it's a trash drink or not, and how Admiral Nelson's so much better. And I'm just like, whatever.
For sure. For sure.
It was fun.
Yeah, it definitely gets the word out on it. It definitely gets the word out on it. Well, so I'm gonna jump forward, because I'm just about to start asking some keg cocktail questions, and I want to wait on that. So let's jump directly into the Jockey box side. So kind of nuts and bolts, big picture, for somebody that does not have experience with the Jockey box. What is what are some of, basically, what is it, and what are some of the different types?
All right. So a Jockey box is essentially like a heat transfer system. So it immediately chills your beer from say, room temperature to about 35 by running through a stainless steel coil that's packed with ice on the outside. And yeah, instantly chills it. And, you know, as long as your beer's not above 75 degrees, you don't even need to ice your kegs.
Interesting.
Which is
because I still remember icing the hell out of everything. But really, so if you're you know, not above 75, you can probably you can pour like an ambient temp keg through one of those.
Oh, absolutely. We
that's crazy.
We take a 4-tap up on our fishing trip every year, and however many sixtels, and they just sit out, and it, you know, generally gets up to 70, 75 throughout the day. And I don't want to lead people down that road, because I definitely don't recommend it for the quality of the beer for it to sit out for days, you know. And that's
sure.
Much like the cold one is designed to have for like a 2-hour, 3-hour event with your friends. That's kind of what jockey boxes are for, whether it's a beer festival or a wedding. This isn't a kegerator, you know. It's you start off with a cold keg, you're going to kick it in 4 hours. So that's why there's really no reason to ice the keg. If you're going to be out for a week and you've got an IPA, like, you'll want to keep that cold.
Sure.
And our you know, we offer front input, which we, like I said, we call bartenders at one point. So that way, if you're pouring a beer for somebody, everything's on your side. And then we have the rear inputs where it's kind of a pour yourself style.
Sure. And so functioning, like you said, now I remember when I was getting into the industry, I had seen a lot of kind of like cold plate versions of them as well. So there's kind of like coil and the cold plate. Does that cold plate does that still exist?
You know, there's people out there that swear by them. They all have more gray hair than I do, but you know, again, that was feedback from brewers. Like we talked about getting into cold plates, but when we asked around, the majority of people said they're just too finicky, they're too heavy. You know, for the most part, as far as I know, cold plates only hold like 12 ounces of beer, where our coils hold 17. So you can pour a full pint and wait a few seconds and then pour another full pint. And you don't have to keep the water off of them like you do with the cold plate. There was a lot of reasons why we opted for the coils.
And that is one of the things. And I mean, I've seen that we're going to jump into that a little bit later, but kind of let's talk about some like operation and some tips, some things to avoid when you're doing that, because I know I have screwed some things up in the past with jockey boxes, and there's a few different ways to do it. So, you know, we know now that it's kind of this mobile draft solution, right? Kind of a mobile short-term draft solution.
Yeah.
What are some of the key points that people need to dial in on to be getting the most out of their experience with the jockey box?
That's a great question. Regardless of the brand of jockey box, you start off by checking your connections. You know, make sure everything's tight on the box itself, and then you connect your hoses to the jockey box and make sure that you have your beer washers in there. And then you tap your kegs, run the beer through the coils. That's the most important part.
Why is that?
With the ice Everybody does it once. I've done it twice. You can create an ice plug, which will ruin your day, and then you have to take all the ice out. If there's some residual water in there, it's bad news bears.
Yeah, I've had that. I've definitely had that happen to me as well, where, you know, because those coils are what's the ID on those stainless coils?
1/4 inch.
Quarter inch. Okay. Yeah. It doesn't take much water to completely to have a full drop to seal it, and then you drop your ice on there, and that thing will freeze in a hurry.
Oh yeah.
And then it won't want to go anywhere at all.
Pro tip: if you put a little vodka in your lines, you can put the ice in your jockey box on your way to your event, and then you can have Bloody Marys.
Look at you.
I've done
I
that.
like it. Well, I know I've seen some different. I know I've seen different people do some different things with that. That's interesting. But anyways, I kind of cut you off when you were talking about tips and tricks with it.
So yeah, I mean, make sure you run your beer or cocktails through that line for sure, because that shouldn't freeze unless it's a super low ABV beer. And I guess there's a chance, but I highly doubt it.
Sure.
But I think the biggest thing I see, and I've seen it with brewers who've been in the industry for 20 years. The common thing I see is people running their jockey boxes at too low of a pressure, like they're in the tap room.
Okay.
But I always tell the brewers to picture it as a long draw system, because it essentially is a long draw system, just, in a coil and stuffed in a box.
Sure.
So to combat that length and the pressure, you need to crank the pressure on your keg to 30 psi, 25 to 30 psi. But for me, it's always been 30 is the sweet spot.
Okay.
And I remember I was at GABF, and this guy calls me and he's like, "Hey man, I can't pour anything but foam. This thing is just not working." And I said, "What are you pouring at?" And he said, 12 psi. And I said, "That's your problem. You got to crank it up to 30. And he's like, "It's already foamy." And I said, "Just do it. Trust me." I said, "Grab a glass, crank it to 30.
Yeah.
And pour the glass out and let me know how it goes." And he's like, "Yeah, it's still foam. I'm pouring it." Wait, holy shit, it's working. Oh my God, it worked. And I'm like, yeah, I know it seems counterintuitive to crank the pressure when you already have foam, but you got to create that balance in the beer.
Yeah, and that was one of the takeaways. I remember when I was brewing at home, the draft system that I was always used to using was, on the home side, sometimes a lot of people use 3/16. And for those of you out there that are metric loving friends, I have nothing for you when it comes for 3/16. So I have a hard enough time with temperature or weight. Okay. So, but when you're that narrow, they'll basically say, is it, what is it? 1 foot for every 2 psi, basically. So if you're pouring a beer at 12 psi, you need roughly 6 feet of 3/16 line. And so, and really, with that jockey box, there's a whole lot of draft line. Just like you said, it's essentially a long pour system. You know what I mean? So you're eating, you have all this restriction on it, and that's why you're losing your balance and the thing's just turning out to be foam. So at that point, it's not a temperature thing. It really is that you have to crank it up in order to maintain that pressure throughout the system.
Yeah, and a couple other things that with jockey boxes that will give you foam are once the beer starts running through the coil, it'll melt the ice that's touching the coil, and it'll kind of create an air pocket. And the beer only has to get to 40 to start foaming, And so you have to agitate that ice a little bit. It helps to pour water in to keep that surface contact, because, like I said, it creates that ice barrier, and it seems like you're doing everything right, but you're pouring foam. And you also want to keep your shanks under the ice, because those are big, thick pieces of metal. And if the sun's hitting whatever, it's going to try and make your beer foamy.
And I think that's another big sell on what on what Coldbreak ends up doing, because you do have that backing plate. And when I was at Gray Line, we opened that thing up. It was that backing plate that you had in there where the shank goes through, and then those nuts are actually tightened down on that. So that's actually waterproof with what you're doing. They do have a gasket on some of the other plastic ones, but you actually want to bury it all the way up past that point with ice.
With ice, yeah. I mean, water, as you know, will sneak into the smallest crevices. So
sure.
If you are going to use water, you just do it to the top of the coils.
Yep.
It doesn't find its way through whatever, because
for sure,
these are hand built. We drill holes in coolers, so we're already creating that.
Yeah, absolutely.
For the most part, it's kind of like a fillet. Wait a half hour and then agitate it and top it off with ice, and you're pretty much set for the day.
Yeah. So what are some of the bigger mistakes you see people on the doing on the operation side beyond the pressure portion of it?
This is a kind of hypocritical thing to say, but not keeping their kegs cool enough. So I have seen it like at Burning Foot one year, which is an awesome festival on the beach. I'm not sure if you're familiar. It's a riot, but there was a brewery, and it wasn't that warm out. It was 80.
Yeah.
And they were getting a ton of foam, and I looked, and the sun was hitting their kegs. Yeah. And so it was just heating that beer up super quickly. You know, it pulls from the bottom, and that's where the sun was hitting. And you could see this is a nice thing about having clear lines going from your keg to your jockey box. You can see what's happening, if it's a dirty line or if you have CO2 leaving solution, which is what was happening. You could see the bubbles coming out of the keg. And I didn't think about it at first because, like I said, I always say you don't need to ice your kegs. Mm-hmm. But keeping them out of the sun is very important. And it turns out they showed up with warm kegs anyway. So
yeah,
I've seen that a few times where the sun will heat it up. And, you know, if you're in Texas and it's 120, you got to kind of, how do I say this without being a jerk? Use your head. I mean, if it's 120 degrees, I mean, I also met a guy from Phoenix that said, I should have hired him as a salesman, because he's like, I do festivals, it's 110 degrees and I don't ice my kegs, and 50-foot coils are perfect. You're the perfect customer.
Right.
Which I do agree with the 50-foot coils being enough thing. I'm the worst salesman when it comes to jockey boxes, because people ask and I'm like, nah, don't waste your money on 100-foot coils. You know, for the most part, it's how you handle that keg before it gets to the jockey box that has the biggest effect on functionality.
Sure. So going from 50-foot to 100-foot coils, does that affect the pressure that you have to be running that beer at?
Yeah, I usually run it. It's more like a 35 to 40, closer to 40.
I can see that. Yep.
And then if you do have a cold keg, you know, that cold liquid's going to absorb the CO2 faster. So if you had a 10-hour event, let's say, and you're icing your kegs and you're using 100-foot coils, that can be a recipe for disaster.
Sure. So I remember, and you can tell me if you think this is the recommended thing to do or not, because for those of you that don't know, I think that Michigan puts on, and this just isn't like, oh, I'm from Michigan kind of thing, but I think Michigan puts on some absolutely killer beer festivals. The Guild festivals are really wild. You know, big festivals, lots of breweries, lots of beer, multi-day festivals. And so what we would always do is we would pour, we would usually keep our kegs iced. But we would have to run at a higher pressure. So at the end of the day, after, you know, having poured for 8 or 9 hours or something like that, whatever it is, we would always uncouple the kegs and then turn the gas off and then blow the pressure down on those kegs before they went, because then they would go back into a cold storage and then be brought back out in the afternoon. Is that really the recommended thing to do, or is there more that we should be doing in a situation like that?
Yeah, that's what I recommend, and that's what I do if I know I'm gonna use the keg for another day. And I've tested it where I'll use a keg on a jockey box and bring it back, put it on a kegerator. You know, I'll purge it like you said, put it on a kegerator. And if I'm being honest, like it is going to affect the flavor of the beer, especially if it's like an IPA. You're gonna kind of scrub that aroma out of the beer if you do it too much.
Sure.
But
yeah, definitely.
Making great beer, you don't have to worry about having to tap it the next day because it's going to be gone, right?
It's already blown. Yeah. Absolutely.
Michigan people can help you with that for sure.
That's right.
Yeah, you're spot on with those Guild events. Like the Winter Beer Fest is such a riot, and UP Beer Fest. I mean, you couldn't ask for a more perfect beer festival.
I remember one of my last Winter Beer Festivals. That one's in Grand Rapids. It's outside. Yes, it's outside in northern Michigan. People that aren't from there, and I mean the beer they brought out the kegs maybe 90 minutes, 60 minutes before we started pouring, or whatever. It wasn't that long, and we had kegs freezing solid. We had half barrels freezing solid. We've had some cold.
It was 4
beer
degrees.
fest. Yeah.
I remember I walked in. The first person I saw was Ernie from Hopcat at the time, Grand Rapids
Yep.
Company. And he's like, "What the is wrong with your jockey boxes?" I'm like, "Put that on me, man. It's 4 degrees."
Yeah, man. It was insane. Yeah, it wasn't even just sixtels. Like you would think, okay, well, yeah, a sixtel's gonna freeze maybe, right? Because smaller surface area, whatever. But no, we had half barrels freezing up. Thankfully, it got a little bit warmer, and probably not some ideal pours that day, but we made it happen. We made it happen.
I remember the next year I was really into Kolsch's, and so I was going around trying to find Kolsch's. And I should have been into barrel-aged Scotch ales because everybody had it was just 10-12% beers everywhere, basically antifreeze.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. That was it. Yeah, that was one of those festivals where you were not going to get something, on the lighter side, on the refreshing side, right? Yeah, the only thing that can stand up to some of that weather. So I always think about the brewer that's in the field at an event with stuff like this. So kind of a twofer. Like what are the go-to things to have in your your to-go box, your toolbox for when it comes to not just operating your jockey box, but also like some like spare parts, things to have, right? The things you don't want to be leaving home without when you've got to pour 6 barrels of beer at a festival the next couple of days.
Yeah, great question. Always want to bring at least one backup coupler and the gaskets for it, faucet gaskets, cleaning can is super great to have. Because I mean, I'm always, and it's probably from home brewing, but I'm always super clean about, like, I use Star San a lot because I like the foam, right? And I'm still a home brewer at heart. But if you have a cleaning can, 4 gallons of Star San in it, you can run it through right before you serve your beer, and then run it through after you're done. Because it is a sanitizer, but it's also, it'll take beer off of a surface pretty well.
Sure.
And beer gets, especially in the summertime, gets sticky so fast. So I highly recommend that. Pitcher and a bucket, because you're going to have foam when you're setting up your jockey box, when you run the beer through first, because you always run the beer through first. Faucet wrench, a backup CO2 tank is very important. We, for what it's worth, and we go to a lot of these fests. We try to bring backup parts like that.
Yeah.
To be helpful. Backup regulator, because jump around a lot. I'm sorry. But
no, you're good. Roll, man.
It can add up, like, cost wise, when you're bringing all those extra parts. So I mean,
sure.
And the nice thing about the beer industry is, there's so much camaraderie, and like, if the guy next to you or woman next to you is not going to see you suffering and just let that happen. Like, they're going to say, "How can I help you?" And they're going to ask around, and somebody's going to find a regulator for you. But don't be the guy that needs the regulator. Be the guy that has the regulator.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and I've had that happen myself. You know what I mean? And so we just bought, like, it was probably like I don't know if it was half toolkit or half fishing box, but it had all the spares, right? So I mean, even down, one of my favorites to bring was the gasket that goes between the regulator and the can.
Yeah,
I always like that because I lost that one time. And I'm like, oh, so
yeah. And I like the built-in O-ring, that I think it's tap right regulators. But that when that fails, like your hose, no pun intended.
Sure.
And, we can't make that fitting be the same size as a beer washer, right?
Yeah.
Because that would be too easy.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, why would we do that?
Right. And there's a gasket on a Sankey coupler that's almost the same size as a beer washer, but not quite. So we got to have that too.
Yep.
And I do see the O-ring behind that goes in between the faucet and the shank. I see that falling off, not incredibly often, but it's not that uncommon. So that's a really good one to keep.
Sure. And you touched on it a little bit earlier, but first of all, I really do love. I remember, I think Star San would be great for that. I remember we would make, a diluted light diluted iodine solution, throw it in a keg, and a 6-cylinder, just push something through the day before, the day after you're done pouring. Just because it does, you don't want that stuff sitting in there the whole time. You know what I mean? And you can flush it out, blow it out, and then drop some beer through it to rinse anything through. But yeah, any any no rinse sanitizer, you get that stuff through there, blow it through there. So I think that's a big one, but let's also jump into talking about, like, how do we maintain these things? I do think there's some day of things that are really good to do, like we just mentioned, but kind of big picture, long term, how should we be treating this? How should we be cleaning it?
Yeah, again, like I said, cleaning in place is the best way to start off, and obviously a deep clean when you get back. Take your faucets apart, treat it just like your draft system in your tap room. Treat it better than that. Treat it like a nice car, right? It's an expensive tool that is necessary, and and like, you want it to look good. And that's part of, as a consumer, it's a frustration to me when I see a brewery that I know makes really good beer. And sure, it's easy for me to say because, I'm part of Coldbreak. Sure. But when I see them serving out of a frat boy Jockey box, I'm like, what are you doing? You put, thousands of hours, millions of dollars, essentially, all this work and time and money into this great product, and then you're serving it out of that thing.
Sure.
That's kind of why we exist. And
the crazy thing is, I mean, there's like, mini cottage industries built around covering up your Jockey box.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Which I always thought was funny. Like, I get it. Like, if you have a theme for your booth or whatever, and the Jockey box doesn't fit the theme, whatever, that's fine. But, I remember when I got in the early 2010s, everybody was covering their Jockey box up because it was a beat up, somewhat kind of nasty looking thing. You know what I mean? And I think that is another nice thing with the stainless stuff that you guys have going on, and with the wraps and whatnot.
For sure. Yeah. And another thing I skipped in regards to maintaining it is letting it breathe. So prop the lid open, anywhere you can let air get in to dry it out, you want to do that because mold happens really quickly.
Sure. So I've always been a big fan of, rinsing that thing, pushing something through it at the festival, getting it back home, and then the Monday after the festival or whatever is kind of like the inside and out clean, right? So we would actually just we would always have the draft cleaning pump, hooking that thing up and spinning on that. Is there a concern with pressure on that? Because I'm trying to remember, it's been some years, because I don't think I've cleaned a draft line since cartridge, and I'm trying to remember what pressure those usually run at. Is there a top end pressure that you want to see those pumps pushing chemical through your Jockey boxes?
I mean, we build them to ideally not exceed 40 psi.
Sure.
So that's kind of where we draw the
line.
Sure.
Yeah.
For safety purposes, you don't want to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Seals, you don't want caustic going flying around.
100%. Yeah, that was just one thing I had in the back of my mind, because I was trying to think. I couldn't remember exactly how much pressure some of those draft line cleaners can push out. So that is something that I wanted to touch on.
Yeah, that's
you might have to restrict that back a little bit. So keep an eye on that if you are going to be using an actual pump for that. But as far as like just like running caustic on it, getting that rinsed, Is it worth throwing some acid at it? And then how do you wrap the process? So say like just your day-to-day, because what I used to do is I would run my caustic, rinse, and I would blow it out with CO2 or compressed air to try to get as much liquid out as I can. And then, you crack the lid and, you kind of wait till next time. What are some of the preferred practices on that side? So as I guess chemical range first, and then kind of on the storage side.
Yeah, we do the same thing. We use generally beer line cleaner,
Yep.
and then a star sand, and then we have coupler caps that you cap the coupler, and it not only protects it in storage, but you can engage the coupler and then blow the liquid out, like you were saying, with the CO2.
This is going to sound like I'm making this up, but when I first saw those coupler caps, I was very excited. When I realized, I can just blow through with this thing. Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, for sure.
They're slick. Again, that might make me seem a bit simple.
Well, no, it's little things, right?
But I cut you off. Go ahead.
No, I don't even remember where I was going. So
no, okay. So the thing is, do you feel as if, because I know sometimes people want to run a sanitizer through it, or they want to pack it with a sanitizer? What's the best way to store that between uses, whether it's short term or long term, or if there's a difference between the two?
Yeah, I like to get as much liquid out of there as possible. Yeah. I've seen where people will leave liquid in there and they store it outside and it freezes and the stainless cracks. I mean, we use 28 wall stainless, which is thicker than most jockey boxes that you'll get. So it's durable, but there's always that risk. There's a lot of pressure and expansion. So yeah, I mean, just because as much as you try to let the next person know what's going on, if you leave a liquid in there, like, they're not going to know what it is. It could be caustic or whatever. So we're pretty adamant about labeling, even if it's just me taking a cleaning can full of star sand to a festival and I'm the only one that's going to touch it and I'm the only one that's going to clean it up, we still mark everything for safety's sake. Sure. We always wear safety glasses, always wear gloves and an apron, and just you can't be too careful, right? Because there's certain things that you can undo. And like I said, the next person doesn't know what's in there. So, we get returns sometimes, and there's mystery in there, whether it's sometimes it's beer, which immediately that it's beer when you open the box. But,
yes. So, oh shoot, where is I going to go with this? I was thinking something about the coils and potentially. You mentioned something a little bit before, but kind of a couple of questions. So, what size beer line do you run from the keg coupler to the jockey box? Does that matter? And two, how do you feel about opaque or non-see-through draft lines with a jockey box?
Great questions. In regards to the diameter and length of the tubing going from the keg to the jockey box, we use 5/16 ID. You can use 3/8. You just never want to get bigger with beer. So if you start, let's say you use 3/16, the ID of that coil is 1/4 inch. So as soon as you get bigger, it lets the beer gets excited and foams all over the place. So you just want to start with a bigger diameter. And I never tried anything bigger than 3/8, but I don't have any reason to. And I don't honestly think to a point, the length is going to matter, if it gets extensive, but it's just going to affect the restriction. But I think 6 feet of 5/16 or 3/8 is ideal. And as far as opaque goes, I've definitely had light strike when I have a jockey box tapped outside in the sun, and that's why we keep it out of the sun. I don't know that opaque would necessarily have a huge impact on that. You would know better than me. I just like to be able to see everything. And a lot of times with an opaque tubing, they're stiffer, so that it decides where you put your kegs rather than you deciding. I hate black tubing when it comes to that scenario though, because you can't, like I said, the thought of like what could possibly be going on inside of that.
I know, man. I really struggle with it. And then, something else I want to talk about, which I'll probably forget, but the wing nut type beer nuts. We can come back to that though. I always hate. That is the thing. I hate seeing lines that, and because even clear lines will get, like weird colored. Like, so I used to push when I first got into the industry, I'd run caustic on it, rinse it, and then I would push some iodine based sanitizer through it and blow it out, right? But you would still pick up a little color, and we all know that the clear beverage line over time gets a tint to it, you know what I mean, whether it's clean or not. But to me, there's just something about not being able to see at all what's going on in that line. It always freaks me out. It always freaks me out. And I've cleaned too many nasty draft systems. I did the Micromatic class, but before I helped to open crankers. So in the interim, he sent me to this draft class, my boss, and I'm sure it's a little bit it's a little bit of ooh and ah flashy stuff, but they have this big glass, like it looks like iced tea jar, like this huge thing, and it was just full of stuff that supposedly came out of a draft line. So yeah, it was absolutely disgusting. So that stuff always sticks in my mind when it comes to stuff like that, you know what I mean? And it is a testament to the fact that you really do need to stay on top of this maintenance with your jockey box, because you don't want a situation where like you're like pushing the border line of what you should be putting the box through in order to clean it. You know what I mean? It's something that should be done every time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, solutions are inexpensive, and the time that you save by cleaning it promptly significantly outweighs the time you'll spend trying to recover from it,
Sure. So back to this question, and maybe this is not like the appropriate opinion on this, but as far as the beer nuts go for those things, I always loved having the little wing nut ones, because just in case you don't have a wrench or whatever. So are you wing nut beer nut guy, or just standard beer nut guy when it comes to these things? We get into the hottest topics here.
Right.
You know what I mean? We get I bet you didn't know this is going to be so hard hitting.
Yeah, I can't wait to wake up and see this all over the news. I personally like the wing nuts for sure. Our standard is just the standard beer nut.
Yep.
It's kind of a cost thing more than anything.
Sure.
But yeah, I love wing nuts. I love quick disconnects. We offer quick disconnects, and I only recommend using them on the gas side, but I'm a hypocrite, so I use them on the liquid side as well. And I've, the bad thing about those is it creates 8 more fail points, right?
Sure.
But when they're functioning properly, it's so
what
nice.
What sort of quick disconnect are you using?
We have our own brand that we sourced and
and what part of the process is it? Like, is it right at the box, or is it down close to the keg? Where's that
at? Basically, you can put them wherever you want, but I like to keep them. Like I said, we try to just do the gas side, and so we just keep it near the manifold, a couple inches from the manifold on either side, and it's just really nice to be done and just pop it off They have lockouts on them, so you can pop it off the tank, and then you're free from the tank. You can pop it off the manifolds, and that minimizes the risk of beer reps or whoever just throwing everything inside the cooler and having the lid propped open and getting it damaged, and it's just easy. Like I said, I use them on the liquid side, but I did have a hop leaf get in there once and shut the party down.
Those damn little hop leaves, man. It can happen. It can happen.
Yeah, it's just the tiniest little thing. Goes from happy face to sad face immediately.
Yeah. What was so I know kind of festival gear. If you want to see the most abused regulator on earth, find a regulator that goes to beer festivals.
Yeah.
Are you a fan of the cage around the CO2 regulator?
I won't go out without it.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's a must-have. Yeah,
because you could just invest so much money in all of I don't think I've ever really had one because I've worked some different places over the years, and it's hard sometimes to get gaskets, let alone something additional, something kind of ancillary to the whole thing. So I haven't used them a lot. So it was actually like an honest question. But I used to buy plenty of replacement dial,
right, exactly.
Because or just have something that's completely unreliable. All it's doing is actually plugging that hole in the regulator. Like it's not reading anything for you anymore. Yeah. So yeah, I've had plenty of regulators like that.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, it's a must-have, and we actually do have some new products coming out. Not as soon as I'd like to, but we're working on some things to alleviate those headaches for people. Can't really get into it right now, but
for sure.
Yeah, it's exciting. I mean, you'll think it's exciting. I think it's exciting.
Yeah, exactly.
Other people will be like
us. Yes.
My wife, well, she doesn't want to hear me go on and on about it.
My wife is very patient. My wife is very patient. Yeah, she does a good job dealing with my stuff.
Does she also listen to you talk about fantasy football?
Oh man, so listen, I'm really into fantasy football. Okay, like I listen to, I do, like this is no joke. I've as soon as the fantasy championship happened, was over, I was going back and I was looking at our draft, and I was like evaluating like what I did well, what I didn't do well, even just from the draft pick scenario, even just by like looking at how the draft fell and what I could have been like structurally my mistakes. I research, I do 12 months out of the year. Like I research it like I have a gambling problem. I do, like, and the weird thing is so my 13-year-old, soon to be 14-year-old is the sweetest man on earth. He and I are both well, it's good these days. It still hurts sometimes, but huge Lions fans. But I'm always worried that he talks football the way I talk football. So he sounds like a middle-aged junkie at school. Like he's talking betting lines and over-unders and other weird like analytics terms and whatever. I'm almost certain I'm going to get a call about that one of these days. But yeah, so it is a huge nerd out thing for me. But my wife does listen to that even as well. Yes.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Ann does too. She's won a few. We're in a league together actually.
Oh, nice.
She's won a few times.
We have a tiny little a tiny little family league that we play in. It's really, I think there's really just 3 of us that play in it. My wife and my daughter will occasionally, it depends on how it goes, but when you're in a 6-team league, like everybody's team is good no matter what.
Right.
So it's always a little bit of a toss up. But so listen, here's a segue. I saw one of the reels that you did for kind of Lions playoff where you're doing kind of a keg cocktail. You had like the kind of like the Honolulu blue Kool-Aid thing going on coming out of that thing. And you had everything Lions branded. Big fan. So kind of let's dip into that keg cocktail side of thing a little bit. What are the things that typically work well for that? What's some things that don't work well? Because, you know, I've seen some folks do, you know, old fashioned on tap, and there's elements of that cocktail where I'm like, well, I wonder if, you know, is this all coming out the way it's supposed to? You know what I mean? Because there's simple syrup, you know what I mean? There's different things like that. So can you bust into that side of things for me a little bit?
For sure. I've done old fashions quite a few times. I recommend using nitrogen, which we offer nitrogen cartridges. But honestly, if again, it's a short term, you know, it's only 2 gallons of old fashions. Like, how long is that going to last? So unless it's something that I know is going to take a long time to go through, I'll be kind of cheap and I'll just use CO2 over the nitrogen because it's half as much. And like I said, it's not gonna absorb the CO2 in 3 hours. But coffee, for whatever reason, does absorb CO2 quite quickly. We were pouring. We do the hospitality for Great Taste of the Midwest, which, if I'm sure you're familiar, was an awesome, huge, sprawling beer festival out in Madison, Wisconsin. And so we'll do non-beer options, like whether it's like a electrolyte drink that we're working on right now, keep people hydrated, or tequila sodas, you know, something different, because we don't want to offer. And we do work with New Glarus, which, you know, humble brag, fanboy a little bit. We will pour Spotted Cow and like Totally Naked or something. Because everybody, you know, not everybody, but a lot of people just want to have a nice low ABV clean beer when they're taking a break from their booth. But yeah, going back to what we offer is, I'll generally recommend CO2 with most drinks if you're not going to be pouring them for very long. Espresso martinis, I love, is one of my favorite cocktails. They mix up well, but the only problem with it is you don't get that like foamy head that you get from shaking it. So if I do espresso martinis, for the most part, I'll just shake it with some rocks, and it still improves the time. Going back to the old fashions, like, I haven't had separation be an issue. I remember I was in Vegas one time last year, and I'm watching this guy just bang out these old fashions, and he's doing a great job. But he's just doing it nonstop, and I'm thinking, man, like, unless and we were sitting at the bar, but if you're not sitting at the bar, to me, like, you don't need the show that goes in. There's a distillery that we go to around our house, and they do an awesome job. But again, like, if I have my back to the bar and I get an old fashioned, I don't care how it got there. You know what I mean?
Put
that shit on tap. Like, and they do a lot of tap, like gin and tonics and stuff like that. And I think it's great. And I love to see breweries offering that now. And I saw that a lot when I went down to Austin. You know, state to state, it's different legally, and it's tougher in some states. I think people from Michigan will agree. And so that's also something that we're working on to start offering is cocktail mixers. Because we sell threaded sixtels from G4. And they operate just like the little 2-gallon keg. It's so great because I've helped brewers pull spears out of kegs. And it is a nightmare. Like, if I had to do that every time,
it ain't easy, man. I pulled a hell of a lot of spears out of kegs, and it's even with the tool, it's a pain in the rear.
And I don't want to do that. So and I actually worked with a sushi place this past summer, set up a Jockey box so they could pour, and they wanted to do a cocktail. And so I showed them the threaded sixtels, and I brought a couple of different mixers, and they ended up buying 10 of the sixtels and swapping, because apparently you can get them from distributors. You can get like a small keg that has the mixer in it, and then you pour the alcohol in and you tap it, and then you throw the keg away, and it's like $150. So you can get you can buy a keg, one of our kegs, for not much more than that, and it essentially pays for itself the first time you use it. And it makes it so, you know, your kitchen staff can mix the cocktails there as long as you give them the information. You know, you don't have to run it through your keg washer. You don't have to take up a bunch of time. You don't have to do all those things. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And so we want to offer that because we have such a connection with the brewers. And yeah, I love to get a really high quality craft cocktail, but sometimes I just like to get a plain old gin and tonic, and
Yeah,
if
man.
you can keep it simple,
yeah,
why not keep it simple and save money and make, because I mean, I'd like to think that consumers know what goes into making beer, but they really don't. Whether
yes.
when it, not to diminish the majority by any means, but I've been around beer for a long time, and I've witnessed how hard people work, and it's a labor of love, and so I love to see these cocktails. So so it brings in more people, and B, so breweries are making a little bit easier money. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. And it really is the case, and I do think, there's a difference. I remember, I've had some friends that, do like bartend at, like the really high end cocktail joints, where they're making foams and different things like that. That's a different animal. The super majority of mixed drinks that are being served, especially shot and pop stuff, you know what I mean? You can get that stuff into a keg and just pour through. You know what I mean? It's not so much about the experience of of that person mixing it in front of you. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
it frees that bartender up. They can make money a little bit faster, and you can cut down on your service time. So it's kind of a win-win across the board on it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I like that. Let's dig into a couple of more things. And one of the things I like to do with the channel is I do kind of like to talk some big picture kind of workplace career stuff. You have an interesting background because you said, was it tool and die that you did before? Yeah. Interesting. So, and I think a lot of us have, different seasons of our career life, right? And so if you were to go back and talk to yourself as a younger man, mid-20s, Boyd, what kind of career or life advice would you give that younger man?
Like I don't want to sound like I'm patting myself on the back by any means, but I've had so many WTF are you doing days since since stepping out, but I listened to, so in Tool and Die I worked with a lot of older guys, mid 60s, and they were bitter, man, but they went through some shit, so I get it. Mm-hmm. But I listened to them, and like the majority of them said, when you have kids, time goes fast, and that every generation before you is going to say that. And but I really latched on, all these guys are saying the same thing, so I'm gonna listen to them, and that had a lot to do with why I started Coldbreak, so I could spend more time with my family. Like, I don't know if you can see this, but that baby is not in prison. That's my background picture. That's actually my soon-to-be 14-year-old daughter. I keep that as my background picture as a reminder of why I started doing this, because she would stand there at the gate. I'd get home from work, and then I'd have to go make chillers. So she'd stand there just quietly waiting for me. And so I always keep that picture as a reminder. So I was around 25 at that time. And so I just really was in touch with that, with, family being the most important thing.
Yeah.
And, as the business grew, like I started to travel a little bit more, and, thankfully and unfortunately, due to COVID, I was kind of forced to be home, and I really, really brought back how great that was. So to go back and answer your question, I would just tell myself to basically do what I did and just stay focused on family being the most important thing. I would tell my one thing that I still don't do well, which I brought up earlier, is ask for help. I would definitely tell myself to do that, and take time to thank the people that do help you, and not necessarily that just help you, just your close people. Thank them for being supportive and helping you get through tough times, because there will be tough times.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, that's.
Yeah, man. I do think, and you kind of mentioned that when you talk to your circle of people, when you mentioned your circle of people, I think one of the things that I've been uncommonly blessed with is because I used to think that everybody had what I had. Like I have this, I have like a really small group of guys from high school. I've got a little bit larger group of guys from college, but sometimes I hesitate to, like, I don't know, like they're people of character. You know what I mean? And like, not just I don't know. There's some substance there, right? And it's one of those things to where they'll call you out when you're on the wrong path.
Oh,
And
yes.
and everybody has their faults, don't get me wrong, but in general, encouraging you through their actions to be moving the right way. So that inner circle is far more important than I think we can realize sometimes. So
for sure, accountability and reciprocation are like two biggest words for me.
Absolutely.
And I've made so many friends in the beer industry because I think the majority of them are like that.
Yeah.
I remember, I'm gonna call him out, Ed from City Built. Man, COVID had just hit. I don't know. We were like, well, we would have been a little bit farther into it because I remember I was sitting on the beach in San Diego, just looking at the ocean, thinking, what the am I going to do? Jockey box sales had tanked, and I get a phone call from Ed, and I'm like, man, I'm trying to look at the ocean.
Yeah.
So I answered the phone, and he's like, hey, man, how you doing? I'm good. And he's like, I need a jockey box. I'm like, you don't need a jockey box. He's like, yeah, I need one for home. And I just like teared up. I'm like, this guy does not need a jockey box. He just is a cool ass dude that wants to help me out,
Yeah.
So that went a long way. It's pretty awesome.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love it.
I talk to him often, and it's just like everybody's like that in this industry, and it makes it so easy. And the sales part is really nice too, being easy. It's easy to sell our jockey boxes to brewers because generally, and it's not divisive. Like, I'll go to a brewery and I'm interested in what they're doing. I like to guess how big their system is, and
sure,
ask them if they use Saaz hops on this Pilsner or whatever. I like to hear what they're doing and learn about it. And then at the end, I'll be like, yeah, and this is what we do. If you ever need a thing, this is the thing we do. But
for sure,
it is easy when we go to trade shows for breweries like CBC. I remember Alec Mull coming up, and we're in DC, and he was at Founders at the time, and he's like, man, these are really nice jockey boxes. Where are you guys from? I said, Michigan. Really? Where at? I said, like 2.5 miles from Founders. No shit. Exactly. How come I've never heard of you? It's like,
right?
Answer their spam, I guess. I mean, I've been sending emails to you guys for 3 years.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean? When they know what a jockey box is, they know how it functions. They can see that ours is high quality. So it's
self-evident. Yeah.
But one thing that we did do during COVID was, shift our focus towards, because mobile bars started becoming a thing. So, Chris was like, let's create content. Let's teach people what jockey boxes are and how to use them. Because like I said, it was too easy in the beer industry. And so we spent a lot of hours creating a lot of content with the great Jay, and it's really paid off. And we still see it paying off, especially like we just did the PGA show. We're trying to branch out into other industries that also pour keg drinks, and it was really fun to watch, because I haven't seen this in a long time, but to watch somebody like figure out like how the jockey box worked and to see it click. It was so cool, including Gary Sheffield. I taught Gary Sheffield.
There you go. He's pointing the bat at the pitcher. You know what I mean with it? Do you remember when Gary Sheffield, like, I think it was his rookie card. I think you may be significantly younger than me, but he had like gold inlays in his front two incisors for his rookie card. And
Really?
it was the first time I had ever seen anything like that in my life. I was a kid. I think it was maybe 1989, but it was wild. But continue. Gary Sheffield.
Yeah, I mean, he still looks like he could bat 300. The guy's
oh yeah.
how old he is.
Yep.
But yeah, and he would just to see people be like, wait a second. So I don't need electricity.
Yeah.
So and then we could direct him to our YouTube channel, and it's so all that work in a really tumultuous times, is that the right word?
Yeah.
Tough times.
Yeah.
So it's nice to see that paying off.
Well, and I think it really does. And I was just talking to Richard Priest from Escarpment last week, and they've invested a lot of time and energy into the content creation side, the scholarly article side, and I do think it pays. I do think it pays. You know what I mean? Getting that stuff out there, making it available. I think it's a really big deal. I think it's a really big deal. So. Is there anything that you guys have coming up that Coldbreak has coming up before we wrap that we haven't talked about already?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, the cocktail mixers, the electrolyte drink, and then we do have some pretty cool festival specific products that will be probably won't be launching until late this year, early next year.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't really want to get into it right now because.
Sure. Yeah, no worries. And so they can find all that stuff at coldbreakusa.com.
Yep. And our social is pretty good to follow. We try to put as much information out as we can at Coldbreak USA on all platforms. And usually we don't do a lot to link our YouTube to our social, but we might change that because we're create, like I said, we're trying to create more content on YouTube, and Chris has been doing a lot of interviews lately with industry specific people, and it's fun. Like I really enjoy stuff like this,
Definitely. And it is tough between platforms. Sometimes like, I mean, Instagram doesn't want you leaving their platform to go over to YouTube. You know what I mean? So there's some inconvenient workarounds, but yeah, it's not necessarily the most seamless way to get that stuff done, but it is good to know to be able to go and check that stuff out.
Yeah, and after we hang up here, can you teach me how to upload an YouTube short onto Instagram?
Yeah, man. Yeah, dude. Well, hey, Boyd, listen, this was a lot of fun. I really appreciate it. I think you were able to give some valuable insights to folks with working on their stuff. Again, everybody out there, this is what I'm not like big on like direct pitches or whatever. Like I like the people at Blickman. I like Dave at Brewed Fiscally. But you've been hearing me shout out this Jockey box for a while because, like Boyd mentioned, when you go to beer festivals and there's people that have to work with Jockey boxes, and then they see these Jockey boxes, they say, "Hey, what's that? Something's different there, right?" So, good to have you on. It was good to catch up. So a big thanks to you, Boyd. Make sure to give them a follow on socials. Check out their YouTube page. And hit them up, dig into that website and see what they might have to help fit your mobile draft needs. Boyd, I appreciate it. And I'll chat with you offline here in just a minute, brother. All right.
Sounds great. Thanks again. Appreciate it.
Definitely. And everybody, so grateful that you're all tuning in. Please give likes and shares to stuff. Consider a channel membership. That's $2.99 a month if you feel as if you're getting value out of what I'm doing. But if you don't got the money for it, no big deal. But anyhow, full of gratitude. Thank you. Stick with me. Next week, I will be with, let me make sure I'm going to say this name right. Yeah, we're getting into like weekly podcast, people. So next week, it is going to be on the 19th. And this one's going to be at noon Eastern Standard Time. I'm going to be talking to Alex Reinhardt, a really interesting brewer that has a new project going on down here that's very close to me. So yeah, it should be cool. So I will see you all then and hope you have a great night.